Tara. We'll go ahead and call the Escada Planning Commission meeting to order to Thursday, June 20th, 2024. Can we get a roll call?
Commissioner Perkins,
Here.
Commissioner Stahl,
Here.
Commissioner Sager,
Here.
Chair Wheeler,
Here.
and Hawks, Carpenter, and Hartwig are absent.
Okay. Looks like we have enough for a quorum, so thank you. First item of business is our approval of the the May 15th, 2024 meeting minutes that are included in our packets.
I move to approve those minutes. I'll second.
We got a motion second. Any discussion needed on this?
I wasn't there, so I can't vote on it, but you know.
Okay. So all those in favor, please raise your right hand. Since she's abstaining, do we need to table this until another meeting, or is it okay?
Yeah, and as long as all of you approve, you have quorum.
But Tara didn't, she didn't want to vote.
Right, but it's based on the number that are.
It's in the house.
Yeah, so, right, you can have people absent and still vote.
Okay,
Quorum.
so motion's approved then. 3-0 with the abstention. Next up, we have commission business. Says we have none, so let's go to public hearings. Ordinance 2024-002, political sign code amendments. Something new for us. So with this, Alan, you want the staff report?
Yeah, I will go ahead and present that staff report if you guys are ready. Let me. All right, here we go. All right, so I will present the staff report for ordinance 2024-002 regarding political signs in the city. Okay, the applicant is City of Estacada, and the proposal is essentially to amend the development code, section 1672, the sign chapter, to remove permitting fees for political signs, to allow signs up to 32 square feet on commercial and industrial properties, and to provide for confiscation and the storage of signs that violate the code. Okay, just some specifics. So right now, the current code requires fees for political signs that are greater than 4 square feet. This amendment would remove that fee for signs up to 32 square feet. The size standards in the current code are they're a bit unclear, so their standards are clarified. It's 4 square feet maximum on properties with residential uses, and then 32 square feet maximum for properties that have commercial or industrial uses, and specifically those that are not in residential areas. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that second point means in just a bit. And then finally, there is no provision for confiscation and retrieval of political signs, and the amendments that are proposed would provide for the removal of such signs with 24-hour notice, and provides that they will be held for 30 days before disposal. And staff findings. So in the report, you can read in detail how this proposed ordinance meets or supports all applicable sections of our municipal codes, chapter 16-128, which concerns code amendments, the statewide planning goals, and the city's comprehensive plan goals. Okay, there's one particular section of the draft amendments that staff would like to get the commission's opinion on, and that's related to the allowed size of political signs on commercial properties that are located near residential properties. And specifically, it's this section here, the highlighted section. So basically what it says is that on a property whose primary use is commercial or industrial, a political sign may not be larger than 32 square feet unless said property fronts the same public right-of-way as one or more adjacent or directly opposing properties whose primary use is residential. In such cases, a political sign may not be larger than four square feet. And I will go into detail what that means. It's kind of a lot of words there. I mean, basically, that is to say that a commercial industrial property can have 32 square foot political sign unless it's located directly next to or facing a residential property. Okay, and then I came up with this kind of graphic presentation here. So this is kind of a mock-up of some properties and street network. You can imagine a commercial property right there in the middle of the block. If there are commercial properties to the side and directly facing that commercial property, then that property would be allowed a 32 square foot sign. And that is even if there are residential properties all around it, as long as the property is directly next to and across from the commercial property are also commercial or industrial. However, if there is a case where there's a residential property here, or facing, then only a 4 square foot sign would be allowed. Even if the other properties were commercial. And if we look to a commercial property on a corner, if directly to the side and across from is also commercial, then they would be allowed a 32 square foot sign, even if the other properties were residential. And again, if across the street is a residential property, the commercial property would only be allowed a 4 square foot sign, or directly next to only a 4 square foot sign. So the question for Planning Commission regarding this section of proposed code is, do you think this wording should remain as it is, should be changed or be removed? Yeah, and this can be discussed after the public comment period, and I can answer any questions if that explanation was unclear.
Alan, it might be useful for the planning commission if we could kind of ground this in the law and talk about why we're doing this.
Okay.
So,
sure.
Political signs, as compared to any other sign, have special protections. There's actually a Supreme Court case. The opinion was written by Justice Stevens back when he was on the Supreme Court. He basically said there is no more effective way to put out your political viewpoint than a sign. So like if you're driving past a property, you know it's owned by Terry Emmerich, he's got the signs up and you're familiar with Terry's politics, you then are like, okay, that's who Terry's endorsing. With that said, there are time, place, and manner restrictions that can be placed on the sign. And the example I'd give is like I-5. So all the signs that are currently on I-5 that are billboards, those were there before Oregon decided not to allow billboards on interstate highways. So they're all what is referred to as a pre-existing non-conforming use. And then you can't put up signs. But in the month or two before an election, the ODOT has to allow people to put up what are referred to as field signs, which are, those 4 foot by 8 foot signs, because of the special protections. So we can regulate, we can have reasonable regulations, they have to be reasonable, but we can regulate the size, and we can limit the number of signs. Like, so you have maybe 1 sign per candidate, so you don't have a property owner with 20 signs for the same candidate in a row. Generally, areas that are traditionally R1 residential, a field sign isn't necessarily in the neighborhood character. So for that designation, it's not unusual to have a smaller sign, like a 4 square foot sign is basically like same size as like a real estate sign. So that's what you traditionally see in like a R1, R2 neighborhood. The less restrictive we are, the less I'm concerned. The more restrictive we can get on the wrong side of the law and allowing people to have their political speech. So if we want to be more restrictive, we need to kind of balance that. What's kind of the community concern that would allow us to restrict versus weighing that against the free speech related to elections. The one thing that the two areas where generally cities will restrict them is signs in the public right of way. Oftentimes people don't understand what the public right of way is, so they'll unintentionally put signs there. It's happened in other jurisdictions I represent. My view is that if city public works or whomever collects those signs, because signs are really expensive, you give people an opportunity to pick them up. Because again, like the goal is kind of trying to educate people about where they can and can't put signs. And then the other thing we have to be a little bit careful for is if it like restricts a motorist vision or something like that. So there can be signs placed in ways that at an intersection where it might cause a hazard. So those are the two areas where generally cities act, and then different cities come up with different ideas as far as the size of signs. There are jurisdictions I represent that have said, you can attach it to a fence or it can have a freestanding sign. We don't want people nailing them to trees, or we don't want them, that's that sort of regulation I'm comfortable with. But again, like the overarching idea is allowing people to express themselves politically while also having, safe community safety, driver safety. So that's why we looked at this. I was pretty uncomfortable with us charging a fee. So we didn't do that in May. And if we were to retain that fee, I would be really uncomfortable with that. So I would strongly advocate at the very least that we remove that permitting process. Plus the amount of staff time it was taking, it was just like, it was not a great use of staff's time to be figuring this stuff out and permitting it.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, so again, if we could get some feedback from Planning Commission on this question. And staff recommendation is to forward a recommendation to City Council to adopt this ordinance as written. So next steps are to hear any public comment. And then commission has any questions for me, wants to discuss, or questions for Peter. And then we'll need a motion to recommend adoption with changes, or denial with findings.
Okay, thank you. At this point in time, any questions for staff or Peter?
I have a question. I guess I'm wondering, why would we want to make the allowable size bigger? And also if it's 4 square feet currently, that doesn't seem, even on properties that I think are in Estacada, it doesn't seem like that's been followed currently. There doesn't seem to have been any enforcement of that. So I'm wondering, will there now be enforcement, and who will be doing it?
We only have one code enforcement official, so I imagine it would be Amy that would be enforcing it. This just makes the standards a bit clearer. I think that signs were allowed up to 32 feet before, but that wasn't really super clear the way that the code is written right now. So we're just clarifying that. Does that answer your questions?
Yeah, sorry, in the packet, it looked like it was currently 4 by 4.
Well, that's for the
maybe
fee.
I might have misunderstood that.
Yeah, so they're free right now. You can have that sign for no fee, but once it gets once
okay,
it's
I
larger
see.
than 4 feet,
I
then
see.
that's charged. Yeah, then it's charged a fee. So we're just removing the fee for political signs up to 32 square feet.
Okay. I mean, I right now there are definitely signs that are left up for years at this point. Not all of those are on in Estacada's jurisdiction, but it's certainly the experience of driving on the highway to get here, coming through town, passing the daycare center, which is wallpapered with signs. It's just like a junkyard of political stuff. And a lot of that stuff is up for years, or, you know, is not associated with a specific campaign and is up forever, or campaigns are definitely left up after the campaign happens. So I guess I'm glad that there'd be some small part of the landscape that maybe somebody would be enforcing, taking those signs down. I don't know. I'm just making it more permissive. I mean, I understand why that ruling exists, but the idea that a political sign is the most effective way to transmit your
Do we lose you?
Terry, you still there?
That's like nuisance.
Hey, Terry,
Yeah,
you kind of,
I'm still here.
sorry, you
Okay.
kind of cut out there. You were talking about how the political signs are a great way to
Uh,
transmit your political message, and then it kind of dropped.
You missed my rant.
did.
Um,
Just part of it.
Yeah, I was just saying, I just don't, I mean, for me personally, the idea that political signs are the most effective way to transmit your political views in 2024 is just super not accurate. It's the way that people transmit their political views is online. And the way that I experience those things outside is just like a junkyard on the side of what should be a beautiful highway. And just, you cannot go anywhere at any time, coming or going from Estacada without
Mhm.
thinking about politics. And I think a lot of people are really sick of it. So,
Mm.
I mean, I guess the one piece of this that I'm excited about is that there's maybe some enforcement mechanism for a small part of it, but yeah, clarifying that signs can be giant doesn't feel very exciting to me.
Sorry. Yeah, so that there is a code enforcement part that's carried over into the new amendments, but it's not really new. It's just basically moved into a section that makes it really clear that political signs are allowed to be put up, I think, 60 days before election day, and then must be taken down within 15 days following. But yeah, as far as whether that will be strictly enforced, I mean, we do, you know, like I said, we have one code enforcement officer, and a lot of our code enforcement is basically report based. So she's going out based on what she's getting complaints about. So I don't know if I would expect this amendment package to fix the problem of there being political signs up for a long time after elections, unfortunately.
I mean, until recently, it was really common that all the signs would come down within 15 days of the election. Recently, people have, you know, been keeping up signs for much longer. But yeah, I mean, this system used to work really well. And people used to feel less passionately about how long they kept their signs up. So I completely understand your point. Our code enforcement's like complaint driven. So, you know, if someone were to complain with that, you know, the signs are up within the field signs are up, you know, we would ask them to remove it. And if they didn't, they could be removed. And then whoever the politician was, if they wanted to pick up those signs, they could. So this gives us a tool. And I don't know, maybe at some point people will kind of return to feeling less passionate about things. But we live in the world we live in for right now. But this does give us a tool for like what I term nuisance signs.
I'm all for a cleaner, simpler approach, knowing that code enforcement's limited in what their scope is and their time available, and whoever's writing the permits out for these things. Alan, I appreciate your diagram. But I I don't want to say I fundamentally disagree, but
Mhm.
I think it would be probably cleaner for, and this is opinion, for everybody involved, if commercial properties are allowed a 4x8 or a 4 square foot, and you just keep residential at 4 square feet. Because as I think about even just driving out the highway here, I know in front of Subway, there's political signs that get put up periodically, and like, who's gonna determine the tangent of the property line? And does it matter? Is it a commercial property? Is it nobody has the time to think about it. And I think it's a lot easier to say, you know what, it's commercial property, you get 32 square feet. It's a residential property, you get
Yeah,
4 square feet.
That is definitely the argument for that, that it would be really fun for our code enforcement officer to have to answer those questions. But yeah, we were trying to, I don't know, trying to capture the will of the council, I guess,
Mhm.
with separating residential from commercial allowances. But yeah, I see your point. Absolutely.
I mean, I live next to a gravel pit, and I would really be bummed if I had to like stare into another set of Chuck Norris's eyeballs every day, every time I left my house, just because I'm next to that thing. I mean, I don't know.
Would it be better if it was Hillary Clinton?
I don't want to look at any of it. I just want to look at the blackberry snarl and the coyote poop. I don't want to look at any signs. It's both. It's primarily Terry Emmert's signs are the ones that are left up incessantly, but there's both parties leaving them up all year.
And I don't disagree. I don't disagree with the junk boats that are in people's property and the Scotch broom and blackberries and tall grass and the code enforcement end of the city is a huge task that I don't honestly know if we'll ever get in front of it and get it to where it's not a complaint driven process. So I agree in a lot of ways, Tara. Do we have anything else, or do we want to go into our public hearing portion? Okay, let's do that. Let's go ahead and go into the public hearing. I have a little bit of verbiage here I gotta read. I'm gonna close the planning commission meeting, open the public hearing. Do any members of the commission wish to abstain or declare ex parte contact? I don't see any hands. An issue which may be a basis for appeal to the city council must be raised prior to the close of the record of the final evidentiary hearing on the specific application. Such issues shall be raised with sufficient specificity as to afford the city council and the parties adequate opportunity to respond to each issue. Failure of an issue to be raised at the hearing in person or by letter, or failure to provide sufficient specificity to afford the city council and the parties adequate opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the city council on that issue. With that being said, do we have anybody that would like to speak on our political signage code amendments? We have a local sign guy here, but I think he's just here to listen, maybe? Okay. Do we have anybody online that might want to speak?
We didn't have anyone register, so.
And nobody else is hiding out there, so I think we can reasonably agree that we can close the public hearing with no comment. And we'll open the planning commission meeting back up for a decision. And again, we have to vote a motion in, second it, and then we can discuss. And Alan has kindly gave us our 3 choices. And as a reminder, this is going to the city council probably at their next meeting.
Yeah, that's
In
right. Let's go
preparation
to
for
the
the-
Monday meeting.
Perfect.
Fortunately, I kind of sit in Ben's court on this one where simpler is better, you know, and I'm not sure I've read that thing a half a dozen times, that ordinance. I'm going, really? Does it make sense to you? You know?
I mean, it's just adjacent properties. I don't know. I don't understand why that's actually really difficult. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we measure by adjacent properties or in X amount of feet of a property.
But I also get the fact that we can't just let every commercial property do that as well. You know, you can't have every commercial property have a 32-foot sign sitting up there. You know, you just can't, you know, paint that with a wide brush. I'm sure not everyone would want to do that, but it would get a little bit, it's sticking a sheet of plywood in every 4x8, it's huge, And how do we go about deciding which one of those is a nuisance? And who makes that call,
The neighbors, generally.
Well,
I get that part, but are they right?
What's that, Tara?
I just think if there's nothing, what grounds would anyone could be able to consider it a nuisance on if there wasn't any protection for properties that are next to residences?
Yeah. Well, if you're a residential homeowner right across the street from a business, when every day you had to get up and look at a 32 square foot sign staring you in the face, you might be a little annoyed by that.
Right, but
especially-
and that's why it would
Yeah.
make sense to keep it in here, that we keep that we keep it from, that we protect the residences that are around commercial properties.
Sure.
I can't make a motion or else I would.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, I move to approve to send to the council. I've seen this kind of off and on since I've been on this commission. It's changed off and on different sizes. But I really feel this is basically, in most cases, set to be best for the people.
So you're moving to approve as,
So I move to approve to move to the council
as Alan has it written
as written.
or presented. Okay, we have a motion. We need a second.
Okay, I'll second it, as much as it makes me ill to approve signs that are 4 foot by 8 foot anywhere. Yeah, let's approve it.
Okay, so it's moved and seconded. Do we need to discuss further? There's something on the tip of your tongue there. Let's hear it.
I'm sitting here formulating and I'm going, oh my God, you're looking at this thing and is this the best language we can come up with? Is there a better way to put this?
I mean, we could regulate it by zone. So we could say if it's a residential zone, it's limited to the 4 foot. We could change it to 24 square foot, so 6 feet by 4 feet. In commercial, I'd be comfortable with that. I think that's probably the most common size of a field sign. I've assisted in putting up some signs. And I'm 5'10" and they were about as tall as me. So,
Sure.
but we could potentially go smaller than that. Anything under 20 square feet, I think we kind of run a little risk, because when you're on the highway and you're going 55 miles an hour, you're probably, the idea is that you'd see the sign and know what the person's view was.
Sure.
I think the biggest component, and to address Tara's concern, is probably section A of this, which we're really not hitting on, is actual enforcement of the 60 days prior to and 15 after. So we don't infringe upon whatever ruling you were mentioning. I don't feel like getting in a legal battle with people that have a lot deeper pockets in the city of Estacado over political signs, so
Yeah, the idea with the 15 days after is that traditionally, after you voted, there's really not been a problem. There's not been necessarily a reason to express your political views anymore. The 15 days gives the campaign enough time to get the signs down, because a lot of people reuse the signs election to election. So that's kind of and that is consistent with the ODOT provisions. I've seen communities go 90 days before an election, 60, I think less than 60 is, we run more legal risk. And then the idea is not to fine people or anything. It's just like, hey,
It's
could you
over.
bring the signs? Could you put them inside? And then 60 days before the general, if whoever the sign is, you can put it back up on the fence. And then people don't have to be reminded of politics for the intervening time. I think it's generally been how it's been treated.
Okay. So we've motioned and seconded, discussed a little bit. Any other discussion needed, or should we vote?
Let's vote.
Let's vote. All right. So again, this is going to city council, and we have adopted staff's presentation here to move on to them. So all those in favor, please raise your right hand or say aye.
I,
Opposed? Tara,
No, I'm an aye.
you're an aye. Okay, perfect. So moves on to city council. Okay. Anything else coming up for the planning commission?
Yeah, next month. July 17th, I believe. There's a conditional use on Broadway. Estacada School District wants to use the building 325 South Broadway for like an after school. No, it's during business hours. Yeah. For like an annex of like a school program. And then there is another ordinance for Parkland Solutions. So the parkland dedication at the time of land division. So that's going to council for review on Monday, and then we'll come back to planning commission in like ordinance form.
And we're probably going to have want to bring a conversation to you about annexations. So the laws regarding annexations keep changing. Traditionally, there could be like a 2-vote. So it was the city voters could decide whether they wanted to annex, and then the property owners seeking to annex voted. It's how it happened a lot of places. We lost the ability to have that local vote about 6 years ago. And the legislature's continued evolving our rights to annex or not allow annexation. Generally, the question is, can urban services, so at the very least water, be provided to the residents is a threshold question that we look at. Additionally to that, they have now changed it. So if a property owner is contiguous to the city, so if they abut the city's boundary, they can annex into the city by right. So we can't say no. If they do not touch our boundary, then we have the option of annexing the property, but we're not required to. So, and this has come up in at a Luba case because King City did a cherry stem annexation to 240 acres, and we got sued and we won. But that made me take kind of a deep dive into the annexation laws. So if they're like, imagine like 10 properties in a row in a straight line. If properties 1 through 4 want to annex into the city and 5 doesn't, then we have to take 1 through 4. We then have the option of not taking 6 through 10. at the point that if they all want to come in, if we want to take them, we can. If 5 wants to come in, at that point, we're required to take 5 as well as 6 through 10. So, the proximity to the properties to the city really matters. And like our ability to control our boundaries has really been taken away, to be frank. So, the reason we're probably going to be discussing it is because we had, people looking to get water from the city. It traditionally, if they don't abut our boundary, we're trying to help them out, because digging a new well is expensive. So we've done what's called a non-remonstrance agreement. And that's that if we ever decide to annex them, they'll annex into the city and that runs with the property. So even if they sell it to the next person, if we're like, all right, time to annex, then they can. So the con of that is that they're paying the SDCs, for instance, for water, but we're not getting the property tax revenue from the house. So from the property. So different planning commissions and different councils approach that in different ways. Non-remonstrance is still fairly common. Requiring annexation is also still fairly common. So we'll probably have that conversation, and then that's something that we'll be asking for from the city as well for some guidance, just so when people approach staff, they'll kind of have an idea of how to process these things.
Interesting.
I have a question on the city services end of thing. I know we're working towards the wastewater treatment plant. Does Sandy still have a moratorium?
Yeah, so they've got what I call a soft moratorium, in that they're like 500 houses that can still be permitted. But beyond that, once they hit that number, they'll be done until they figure out how to locate their wastewater.
So in the event that we have, and this is like a total what if, but if we get to the point where we annex everything within our urban growth boundary, and maybe our wastewater treatment plant isn't up and we determine there's not capacity, is there a process that those lots, say the residential lots, could be on septics within the city limits under our jurisdiction? Because typically we require, if they're annexed and then there's a new service that you hook up to the city service, right? But if we can't provide it, how does that work? And same with the water rights end of things. If we get to the point where we can't get more water rights, can we allow them to drill a well?
Yeah, I mean, I represent the city of Gerhart, and there is no sewer. Every house in the city is on septic. So that's before we got there, we'd be having a lot of conversations with DEQ but if we reach the point where we can't provide the urban services, at that point, we don't have to annex them. So we would, now if we wanted to annex them, we'd have to figure a workaround. But yeah, but the problem with the septic is that you really need, you need a larger lot, because you need the drain field. And so it's possible that they wouldn't be able to, and there's new technology above ground. Though neighbors don't love that. Sure. But yeah, so we would have to look at the lot size and see whether they could locate a drain field in that instance.
Okay. I know it's a major what if, but
I mean, I think that we're unfortunately in a situation where Malala is almost out of residential land. Like they're, I think, at like 20 net developable acres for R1 residential. You've got Sandy in a soft moratorium. You've got Canby, who's trying to get a UGB. Happy Valley can only develop as the urban services move east. And so we're getting just a ton of development pressure. And I don't necessarily see that changing in the near term. I mean, King City got a 540 acre UGB expansion approved by Metro in 2018. And I was at the Court of Appeals 3 weeks ago. So it's like our vaunted land use system if you want to act quickly, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's opposition, they can hold it up for years. So like I'm aware of the development pressure we're getting, and we need to monitor our ability to provide urban services, but I have every reason to think we're going to continue to feel that pressure.
Okay.
I kept thinking that back in the day when Gresham had the same problem, because we lived there and we had a septic in our house, but all of a sudden Gresham decided to come in and develop a sewer system for that. And my parents they brought it right down the road. And of course we had to hook up to it, and there was a huge cost to it at that point, it was $2,000 or $3,000 back in 1970 or 80.
Yeah, there was actually legislation for the area that's called Mid-County, which used to be unincorporated Multnomah County, and they required all of them to annex into the city of Portland and hook up to sewer.
Right.
And this would only be interesting to a land use attorney probably, but
Sure.
Barlow High School was still on septic.
Yeah.
They had to get, because it's technically not in a city, so they had to get a goal exception in order to hook it up to sewer, which surprised me, but
I
the way it works.
can remember the honey wagon. Yeah. that's
Yeah,
crazy.
I had cousins that he worked for Boyd's Coffee, and so they lived kind of in the Orient area.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we spent a bunch of time there growing up.
Okay, any other questions? Any other legal advice we need while Peter's here?
We need you here more often.
I think I'm probably going to be staffing the planning commission more often going forward.
Okay, well, we look forward to seeing you.
All right.
Any other commissioner comments, public comment? Doesn't look like it. Let's go ahead and adjourn this thing at 2:44.
Thanks, guys.